Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.
If the panel could just take our seats very quickly, we'll be started in just a couple of minutes. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Esteban Garcia. I'm the Chief Health and Wellness Officer. For those of you who don't know, I'm relatively new. I've been here now going on months as opposed to weeks. So we've managed to meet 2 months. So thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon for this important discussion that we're going to have. And I'd like to start by thanking President Bylock who's here, for being here and supporting this week-long visit that has really been amazing already and will continue for the next couple of days. So really important work that we're doing. A couple of housekeeping notes, just make sure, I mentioned already to silence your phones. I think that's very important to do because we will have some mindful moments during this presentation as well as really good wisdom sharing, so that would be great. And then I do want to thank our Mindfulness Dartmouth Institute and other supporters, and the MDI includes a group of staff, faculty, alumni, and students who are working to promote the mindfulness-based practices and principles throughout the extended Dartmouth community. So they're one of our sponsors today, and we're very grateful for that. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a pediatric emergency medicine doc and a public health practitioner. And, I really understand, and it's taken me some time, but I understand that what's so important for us are these practices and movements that support individual and community well-being in a proactive way, really allow us to achieve our best selves. Also, the events like this and those happening throughout the week will provide access and experience and learning from our honored guests and internal members of the community to create and sustain a campus culture of mindfulness, mindful resilience, authentic connection, and compassionate leadership. And that's stated by our Mindfulness Dartmouth Institute. So really excited to be here. So we have a panel today, and we'll be joined by, and they'll be contributing by Brother Phap Liu, a 97 Dartmouth alum from Deer Park Monastery in California, as well as Sister Quinn Neum from the Magnolia Grove Monastery in Mississippi. In addition, Sienna Craig, an anthropology professor and researcher, as well as an author. Sonu Bedi, professor of law, political science, and government, as well as the director of the Dartmouth Ethics Institute. Diane Gilbert-Diamond, Dartmouth alum, 98 Dartmouth alum, professor epidemiology, biology, and health behaviors researcher. And Caitlin Barthelmes, public health practitioner, researcher, and director of the Dartmouth Student Wellness Center. So great conversation, and at this point I'll turn it over to our moderator, Scott Pauls, mathematics professor and director of the Dartmouth Center for Advancement of Learning. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. I'd like to open our discussion by asking our monastic guests to open with a moment of mindfulness.
I would like to invite everyone to find a comfortable position. Sit in such a way that you can feel completely relaxed. You may like to close your eyes. Feel your body weight on the chair. Relax all the muscles on your face, and you may like to keep a light smile on your lips to help the muscles on your face to relax. Relax your shoulders. And you can become aware of the flow of air coming in and out of your nose with each in-breath and each out-breath. Feel the rising of your abdomen with each in-breath and the falling of your abdomen with each out-breath. If there are any tensions within your body in this moment, you can embrace them, smile to them, and release them. We will enjoy a sound of the bell, and the sound of the bell will help us to return home to ourselves. Coming home to this present moment, to our breathing, to our body. Listen, listen. This wonderful sound of the bell brings me home to my true self, my true home in the here and now. Breathing in, I enjoy my in-breath. Breathing out, I enjoy my out-breath. In, out. Breathing in, I have nowhere to go and nothing to do in this moment. Breathing out, I have arrived. Nowhere to go and nothing to do. Arriving. Breathing in, I know this is a wonderful moment to be sitting here in the company of friends. Breathing out, this is a wonderful moment. Present moment, wonderful moment. So dear friends, thank you for your practice. You can gently open your eyes.
Thank you for that. Seems odd to just sort of jump into talking. I'd like to start to ask each of the panelists, and maybe we'll start at the far end of the table and work our way over, to just briefly share how mindfulness shows up in your own personal or professional practice.
Thank you. So I had the ability to go to Deer Park Monastery, where some of the monastics have come, about a year and a half ago, and got a deeper introduction to mindfulness practice. And I would say since then, I've had a much more joy and happiness in my personal life, much more ability to deal with the demands of being a professor, researcher, mother, wife, daughter. So I feel like my capacity has grown tremendously. And that has had incredible professional ramifications, where in my work relationships with colleagues, I'm not carrying that stress into our interactions. In my research, I'm not carrying that stress and fear of failure while I'm writing the grants, while I'm writing my papers. I just have more freedom to do what I love to do without that burden of stress. And in my teaching, it's been an incredible just opening of my teaching. I feel that I've had the ability to connect with students on a different way. I think as a professor, I'm supposed to kind of be very confident and know everything. And in some ways, students can be a little threatening. Like, are they going to discover I don't know every single thing about everything in the world? Are they going to challenge me and try to maybe take advantage of, like, pushing deadlines and things like that? And just with mindfulness practice, I've been able to let go of some of that, which has allowed me to foster much more genuine connections with my students. I can share with them when I don't know something. I can share with them that I've had trouble learning things, and I think that's allowed us to have much more genuine relationships. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I would agree with everything Diane said. I would say that, so I began sort of yogic practice, at the start of COVID, right? I mean, there was not much else to do at the time, but, and since then, I would say that it's been very impactful. And so here's some of the ways it's been impactful. One way is that there's an awareness that there's always an opportunity to relax into a situation. And so in yoga postures, the postures can gradually become more advanced and more complicated, which of course means that there is a greater opportunity to relax into them. And so there's an awareness that actually that also will work outside of what would be considered a traditional yogic practice. And so it doesn't matter what the situation is, or, if you're speaking, if it's a school function, or it could be a date, it could be anything, in a way in which it's an opportunity to relax into it. And so I've found that has allowed, one, a lot more fun in Dartmouth, and in teaching in particular. One thing in teaching, when I began teaching at Dartmouth, students would say, he speaks so fast, he's too fast. And I realized that the fast was because there was a nervousness, there was an anxiety. And so as a result, it was that. And so now it's like, the students are, well, when are we going to get to that? I'm like, well, we're going to get there, like a lazy river. And so I've found that, and as a result, in sort of relaxing into situations, I now see that whether it's with other colleagues or with students, you see sort of the nice features of it. You see the joy, you see what's cool and interesting that they're doing, and then of course you can marvel at that. And so I will say, in terms of research, that also happens, believe it or not. I teach courses on the Constitution, and a result of sort of this yogic practice is an awareness that disagreement is a feature, not a bug, of the Constitution, and also of how we understand ethics. And so for students and for all of us, that disagreement can be uncomfortable, right? Just like a advanced yoga posture. But it's precisely because it's uncomfortable that there's such a nice opportunity to relax into it. And so that has allowed sort of the way in which pedagogically to get students to, slowly relax into the disagreement in a way that allows for us to explore the issues. And so, yeah.
Likewise, I agree with everything that's been said so far. And we'll add a little bit about, so my personal journey into the kinds of contemplative work that I brought into the classroom and brought into research began when I myself was an undergraduate. I went to Brown, and I was drawn for various reasons to religious studies. I was not raised, I was raised by hippie parents in California, with they've rejected what they had and, exposed me to a lot, but I became very curious both about the cultures and traditions of both Hinduism and Buddhism, and ended up in Nepal as a 19-year-old undergraduate student, and began learning first Nepali and later Tibetan, and living in culturally Tibetan and Buddhist communities. And so that was my first introduction to this idea that has become secularized as mindfulness, right? But that is obviously not secular. And that's, I think, an important thing to name. But that I became enduringly interested in those tensions between studying something and being a serious scholar and the work of practice and how those two things inform each other. I was very fortunate to have two mentors at Brown who were both scholars of Chinese religions and of Shin Buddhism from Japan, but who were also practitioners. And in early and tentative ways, we also found a pathway for those students who were interested to practice together, to sit together. And so that was my first entree that really framed, where I've chosen to go both with my life. I still work in Nepal, I still go back every year, and the ways that I began to try to think and understand about how different forms of contemplative practice shape culture and shape how we approach the world, shape our ethics, but also how things can transcend culture or move across cultures in really genuine and meaningful ways. And so the work that I have been doing on this campus has been to try to ask these questions of myself and of my students of how can we incorporate contemplative practice into pedagogy so that it doesn't seem like something that is extra or is unnecessary or is, co-curricular only, but that is actually part of what it means to learn. And in a way that is also respectful of the need to also retain some degree of overt discussion and separation between this thing we call religion and all these other ways of actually just practicing and what practice can mean. To sit with uncertainty, to be vulnerable. These are things that I do with my students, much like Diane has described, and to show up and be together in those ways. It creates a very different classroom dynamic. I see this as part of my rationale, my inner rationale for taking on the work of being a house professor, because this is also about breaking down some of the boundaries around where we, keeping respectful boundaries and learning to live with structure and discipline and all of the other things we learn from contemplative traditions, but also to see each other as full human beings and to treat each other and show up for each other as full human beings.
Hi, so I think I might start with how it shows up in my work before my personal life. So as the director of the Student Wellness Center, mindfulness is a strong thread throughout many of our offerings, especially in the well-being side of our office. And that's because it really helps us realize the goals that have kind of been touched upon of providing opportunities for our community to have moments of reflection and insight, those authentic connections that have been talked about, and also mindfulness helps inspire intentional action as well. And so how it came to our office is, I'd say, close to 10 years ago, we were looking at the evidence, what helps our community and our students and as individuals in a community to flourish, to foster well-being, and mindfulness has compelling research around that. And so that's what brought it to our offerings, and what has grown it has been the feedback from students and the impact that we've been seeing on students who have come through, and not just students, staff and faculty as well, who have had these experiences. So that's been really exciting. And then on the personal level, I've had the good fortune to be exposed to a variety of mindfulness and meditative practices throughout my life. And I have found they really help, kind of to what Sienna was just saying, complement and deepen my own religious contemplative practices. And I have felt that benefit to my well-being as well when I remember to use them, which is not all the time. But one advantage of working in the Student Wellness Center and with colleagues like this is it's a constant reminder to practice the skills that we are hoping to teach and encourage in our community. So definitely a benefit of the job.
Would our monastic guests like to comment as well?
So dear friends, dear President Bylock, and others, I just want to recognize the great good intention that is here in this panel, and also here in the audience. By showing up to this event, I feel like we're honoring the life of the mind and well-being in general in our community here at Dartmouth. And so thank you. Thank you for your presence. So our teacher, the Master Thich Nhat Hanh, came as a special student to Princeton in 1962. That was the first time he was out of Asia, and he discovered that he was trying to understand why what became basically the American empire, was wreaking such havoc in his country. And he's trying to understand the mind. And so through the University of Princeton and then Columbia, he was looking deeply and trying to understand what is it about this culture of learning that we have in the West that is contributing to this kind of military-industrial complex, right? And so that's his energy of mindfulness, trying to look deeply into the collective of our society and understand how maybe some of the ways in which we've set up our ways of acting are, although very intelligent, they might not be leading to our own well-being and the well-being of others in our community. And later he came back to Vietnam and did a lot of work working in villages, mobilizing young people. And then he came back at the invitation of Cornell University and started to speak out about the situation of the war. And he saw that he couldn't stop the war from happening in his own country, but what he could devote his life to was finding a way to transform our collective consciousness, to understand where this violence emanates from. What is it within our culture that is actually watering the seed of violence and causing it to, people with good intentions and goodwill to actually hurt each other. And so he spent his entire life, and he passed away 2 years ago, and I was great fortune as an alum of Dartmouth to take some time off after school, and I managed to find this community, and I became part of, it's not really his project, it's a larger project that is kind of going on, and it's not just started with him, it's been continuing. It's about, it's a deep thread of nonviolence that I feel is working its way through society, and it's giving me a lot of hope. And part of the way it manifests is actually in our practice. So what we're doing in a kind of, we are sitting here as individuals, but in a way we are, we know, when you start mindfulness practice, we are not so much individuals, but actually we can operate as a collective level. And so I feel our most important role in coming here to Dartmouth, and my particular role in that as an alum, is to open up that space and create spaces where people can eat mindfully, put down their cell phones while they're eating, like we did today in the dining hall. Have people who never met each other, students who've never met, to have meaningful conversations after they've eaten in silence for 20 minutes. Just because that silence actually is more binding in bringing us together as human beings than perhaps our conversation would be. and even what I'm saying right now might be, you know, less, you know, connecting than just the silence that my sister inviting the bell, and all of us sitting here, following our breathing. So that's kind of what we're doing. I mean, and we're always, we're doing it in an aimless way. So we don't come here with an intention. You know, Diane and I were just joking because we're here at Dartmouth together, but we didn't know each other. And then somehow, through her research, she came to mindfulness. And then we reconnected. I found out that her husband and I were on the freshman trips together. And now they are coming to the monastery. And so there's something going on. And it's very beautiful to see it happening. And we are, you know, all the monastics who are here, we're just a part of it. So we feel very honored. And we are also learning, right? We are not like the ones who have the solutions, but we're coming in to build relationships and look how we can look deeply together at what we're doing. Maybe my sister wants to add.
We all know that there are many benefits to practicing mindfulness. Among them are to cultivate awareness and calmness, to help us to stop, to slow down. I think many of us, we live like a very busy life. We're overscheduled, and sometimes with that kind of lifestyle, it can make us accumulate a lot of tensions within our body and also a lot of stress. And also, you know, the practice of mindfulness can also help us to stop our thinking. When we practice mindful breathing, we allow the mind to stop thinking. Sometimes, you know, in our daily lives, we overthink. And that can also, you know, it can also accumulate a lot of stress within our mind. And when we want, you know, physical strength, we work out or we exercise. But with mindful breathing, that will help us to calm down and also to have mental wellness. So I think that's very important that we are able to, you know, apply mindfulness in our daily lives. And I think it's important, you know, as faculties or as staff, especially at Dartmouth, it's you're taking on the role of leading, guiding, and teaching. And so it's very important that we also have that well-being within ourselves so that we can be calm, we can be patient, we can be kind and compassionate. And that can also affect others when we interact with others, especially the students in the classroom, our co-workers, our fellow mates. And so there's a connection between, you know, ourselves and the people that we are interacting with. We inter-are, so, you know, how we are affects the other person as well. And it has a ripple effect on each other. So it's very important that we also take care of ourselves, take care of the emotions that are arising in us, take care of the pain and the tensions that are within our body so that we can have a well-being in our mind and in our body. And that's very important. If we are able to take care of ourselves, we can also take care of each other because how we are can be reflected in the other person when we are connecting with others and also interacting with others. So I think, you know, on many different levels, we can benefit, you know, from the practice of mindfulness as an individual, as a community, as a society. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for those reflections. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote extensively about the impact that mindfulness can have on educators and how that can translate into their ability to support students. So I'm going to turn back to the monastic guests and ask, what sort of is mindfulness in that context, and why might staff and faculty at Dartmouth choose to bring these practices into their class or into their work?
Thank you. That's a really important question. And I want to touch on something that Sienna said, which was the courage to be vulnerable as a professor. It's very, I mean, I know when I was a student here, I had so much, and I still do have so much respect for the professors who taught me. And sometimes we look at them almost like gods, and they seem to have, be imperturbable. But I have to say, over the years, I came back to Dartmouth, I got to know some of my professors more as human beings, and I came to have much more compassion and understanding. And I came to see all the difficulties and suffering they had in their own lives. And so that is a really revolutionary aspect of his vision, of our teacher's vision for education, is how can the teacher learn to actually not spill their suffering, but to be able to speak with compassion about their own suffering to their students, so they open a space where you're actually building a community in the classroom. So, because real community, we have understanding, right? Without understanding, we can't have real community. And for understanding to be there, there has to be some recognition of the suffering that is there. It's not enough just to think, oh, things are great. And we need to be able to honestly share about things that are happening in our lives, difficulties we're having, maybe stress, maybe mental health issues, right? So somehow, you know, as leaders in Dartmouth and teachers, if we can create a space where people feel, first of all, they get the training, right? So they learn how to breathe mindfully to actually have more resilience, because you have, as a teacher, you need to be a model in a sense, right? You can't just teach mindfulness practices, you actually have to practice them and embody them yourself. But in any way that the infrastructure of the college can support mindfulness, I think that will allow for students who are in crisis to be recognized, embraced, to feel comfortable, to feel it's safe to come to their professor, because maybe they don't know to go to safety and security, or it used to be Dick's house, I don't know what it is now, but the wellness place, they don't know where it is they can go. And they, especially Dartmouth students, they feel like they shouldn't have a problem, right? Like, I'm at Dartmouth, so I shouldn't have a problem. And so there's a kind of pride as well that needs to be recognized. And so I think, looking at, it happens in every community where people are overwhelmed by strong emotion and take their own life, right? But that's a moment for us to really stop, like my sister shared, and be mindful. It's not to blame or judge, it's to look deeply and see what is it that we could, how could we have been more accessible? I mean, I know some of the staff and faculty who are close to some of the students, and I see the pain that they have. And it's not to say we can save everybody, right? We do our best. That is a very Buddhist thing. We try to save all living beings, and even non-living beings, the minerals and so forth. But how do we, as professors, open our own hearts so that we can create a space where the student can share their suffering? I feel that is the most revolutionary thing that he's bringing up. And I know it's difficult because it's not something you can put in a box or in a simple technique. It really requires deep looking in the moment and knowing when and how to create that space. So it really is based each on our own spiritual practice in some way, shape, or form, whatever that practice, contemplative practice that's coming from. And I think mindfulness is, can be easily, there is a problem of secularization, right? So we understand that it's coming from a tradition, and not only Buddhism, but there's an aspect of mindfulness in every religious tradition. But I think the important thing that I also resonate with in what Sienna shared is that practice of mindfulness needs to come coupled with ethics. In fact, we call them in our tradition mindfulness trainings, the ethical aspect. Because when we look deeply, we see that our behavior has real effects in the world. Our thinking has real effects in the world. Our speech has real effects. And so when we're mindful, we actually act and cause less harm. And so the ethical aspect is going together. So we can't, sometimes when we say secularized mindfulness, we assume that it's like mindfulness divorced of ethics. But I think that's a wrong path. I think we need to heal that and bring it back together. And we don't have to have fear, because we're not talking about a belief system. We're talking about a way of being in the world, a way of practicing being with our breath, being with our body. Sorry, I go on a bit long, but I could go for quite a bit.
Would you like to add your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel that it's very important to create a space and also conditions where everyone can practice, because the practice can allow us to have a different way of being. And sometimes, we go to classes or we go to school and we get an education, but yet we don't know how to take care of ourselves. We don't know how to take care of our strong emotions that might arise in us. For instance, anger, despair, loneliness, sadness. And sometimes we do not get those kind of teachings anywhere, and it's very difficult when we are in that state, with those kind of strong emotions. We can easily take our own lives, and we don't want that to happen. And if, here, we can create those kind of conditions and those kind of space to take care of, of those emotions, for those who are in need, I think it would be very helpful for the well-being of everyone. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, I'd like to connect that a little bit to the practice of our local panelists. So for each of you in your different roles here at Dartmouth, maybe you can speak a little bit to how you have taken this practice into your work, and what the details of that look like, and how you've implemented these things through the lens of your own discipline or your own teaching practice. And let's go this way this time, so I'll start with Caitlin.
Yeah, I really appreciate the connection that's being made between sort of the emotional intelligence that comes along with the practice of mindfulness. I think that connects deeply with the skills that we're trying to encourage in our community and in our students. And, I hate to bring it back to the research, but that is on my mind as well. And I love that we have lived experiences, but we know that that well-being is associated with deep learning, and we also know that teaching practices influence well-being. And so for me, when I think about the win-win for both the professors or lecturers or instructors and the students for bringing these practices into a classroom environment, it creates that supportive container, right, in which you can feel the empathy and compassion that's being talked about, and all the members of that class or that training or that workshop feel seen and heard. And I think that really connects with, our goals at Dartmouth for creating that sense of belonging that's so critical to living and learning in our space. And then there's the practical academic side of things too, where, it can help with focus. It can help with creativity and being open to ideas. And I think speaking more concretely about some of the recent work in the Student Wellness Center that you'll hear from Heidi later, but we did a collaboration with Heidi and her German classes where some of this was mindful moments were brought into the classroom along with some other well-being practices. And when we surveyed the students afterwards, these things were being said. The majority of students, they felt more mentally prepared for class. They felt more focused and present. They also, though, actively supported the fact that it helped their learning of German, of the content area, right, of grammatical structures, of pronunciation. It enhanced their learning of that subject matter. And then from the well-being side, which, I'm always paying attention to, they reported feeling less stressed. They reported feeling more connected to others. And then they said it was done in a way that made them feel safe and cared for and comfortable. And those are the kind of learning environments that I want to see more of at Dartmouth.
So I'll give a couple of examples of the ways that in the classes that I teach, I've begun to incorporate contemplative work, mindfulness, into the curriculum, into the syllabus. So I taught for a number of years in collaboration with a colleague at Geisel a course called Rites of Passage, the biology, psychology, and culture of life's transitions. It's a really fun class to teach. And as you can imagine from the content or that sort of descriptor, there's a lot of reflection that is required in trying to think about those things. And so for the last offering of that class last spring, I thought that this would be a good space to try to bring together a longstanding interest going back to my own undergraduate days and connection to the Mindfulness at Dartmouth initiative and other work that has been seeded over many years here by many people. And so I reached out to Sid Babla at the Student Wellness Center, who I'd worked with in various capacities before in my house professor co-curricular role. And we decided that we would incorporate weekly yoga nidra sessions into the core of this class. And what we did is create the container such that it wasn't required that students went every time, because that can add stress, but we created the container that they were required to go 50% of the time. So 5 out of 10 X hours, they needed to show up and be guided through a process of deep relaxation in Rollins Chapel, under Sid's guidance. And my contribution to that pedagogical moment was not only to show up and be a student, and I think that this is also an important part of what works here. They see me, in whatever ways students see me, right, as a source of authority, although I share the same thoughts that Diane was offering earlier about how I might feel fearful sometimes of my own students, right? We meet each other in this in this meadow of experience that is a practice. And by creating a container that required them to show up at least some of the time, it gave, and we got this through the research that we've been doing after the fact about this class and in the self-reports from students at the end of the class, by saying you need to show up, but you don't need to show up all of the time, it created permission for them to show up for themselves. And so many of the students ended up coming far more than 5 times, but they realized, and so it also moved in terms of your own learning, it moved them a step or two beyond the kind of transactional notion of why they were in the class in the first instance. They weren't there they had to come at a certain level to get a check from Sid or scan the QR code, yes, you're here, but it became de-instrumentalized over time, and the learning got deeper in a different way. My contribution to that space was I love poetry, I like to read it, I like to write it. I believe in free writing as also a mindfulness practice. And so I choose a poem every time, and so at the end of the Yoga Nidra session, I read that poem and I provide an open-ended prompt, and then we write for 7 minutes. And it was the combination for many students of that full body experience and then an opportunity to engage with your heart-mind on the paper that was really helpful to them in sort of where they went after class and where they went with the class and with their term. So that's one example, and we've sort of then reverse engineered that. So we took something that began in a classroom, and now we do it weekly in a co-curricular space, Sid and I continuing to collaborate as a house communities offering. And that's also been very successful. People continue to show up. I've had another experience in a more recent class that's focused on the area of the world where I work, Tibet and the Himalaya, where we've done a similar thing but introduced different practices and tried to make different kinds of connections between the course content and sort of where in the world some of these orientations to the mind come from, and then the practices that we worked with together. And we varied what kinds of practices we did. So we were not just doing Yoga Nidra, we were doing a mix of other practices. And that, yet again, had a different layer of learning to it about how that positively affected students' experiences, where they struggled, and what it meant to them. So we're in the process still of unpacking all of that, but it's been really wonderful.
Great, thanks. I agree with what has been said here. I'll second it. And I will say it's definitely the case that if we're relaxed, and the professor and the students, that the learning will be enhanced. And so, Caitlin, thank you. I mean, that's true, okay? I mean, that's an accurate statement. And so the question is, I was just telling students, I would love to do yoga and the Constitution. We're talking about the Constitution. We take breaks to do yoga, right? And so I'm looking at President Bilikins. Anyway, so, and so part of that is how to get everybody to relax. So now, I want to take this class. That's another thing. I think there's so many cool classes here that I would, can take them from my fellow colleagues, right? But so one way that I have incorporated a relaxing practice is what I call is easy yoga, which is laughing. So every time we begin the class, when I begin class, I'm like, something that will be funny. Right now, usually it could be some TikTok I saw, and then like maybe 2 students will laugh, and I'll be like, just 2, then more of them will laugh. And so the idea is to get, as many folks to laughing together, right, sharing that. And so then, okay, once that's, there's now space for us to discuss the fact that, disagreement is a feature of the Constitution, and in fact, is something that we can marvel at because, we just laughed. And so in a way that, so if the students are relaxed, then they can, the learning is enhanced. And so the other thing I would say is that it's also the case, and in particular, this goes to the content I'm creating, you talked about German, Caitlin. I would say the fact of, being relaxed in the classroom has also allowed my own, the way I see it, the way I see the Constitution, the way I instruct students, it's a lot clearer, it's more visible, meaning I see how the pieces fit. And so part of it is I tell students that we're going to engage in this class of intellectual yoga. So we're going to take things that may not appear that they fit, right? Disagreement doesn't appear that it fits. You think they're too, but actually suggesting that there's a way we can understand that it does, right? And so at least that's the trailer, right? And so, if students stick around. And so the idea here is that I view that as a kind of intellectual yoga that reveals the truth of what's being said on this panel, that when, we're relaxed, the learning is going to be quite nice. And I'll just say, because I think Esteban, we have not met, but, I think of faculty, for example. If faculty meetings, prior to every meeting, all the faculty members got a massage, I think that would be a very effective faculty meeting. You can imagine. So part of it, right? Okay, so there are ways in which, we can find this kind of mindfulness practice. Obviously, yoga I see as sort of the, the sort of the practices here. And so, but even if they're kind of very basic practices, I totally see how this is advancing learning.
I also endorse the faculty massages. So I studied biology when I was here, and I had wonderful professors, and I was so thrilled to learn that material. It was just so exciting, and the connection in the world. And when I started practicing mindfulness, it actually generated that same feeling of recognizing the connection that we have in the world from what we eat coming into our bodies and composing our cells. And all of that just was kind of reinvigorated for me. And so when I came back and had been practicing mindfulness, I had the idea to create a mindfulness class linked with biology. So I proposed this to the biology department, and it's a mindful physiology class. It's not the physiology of mindfulness. We're not only studying how mindfulness affects physiology, but we're studying biology with mindfulness. So, for instance, I'll teach about water homeostasis and how water supports life and how our kidneys and our brain will regulate water in our bodies. And then we'll practice mindful drinking. We learn about the digestive system and the different nutrients we need to live, and then we practice mindful eating. We learn about how our muscles and skeletons work, and then we practice mindful walking. And the goal of the class is to give students the time and the space to connect with how amazing what they're learning is. So it's not just chapter 2 in their book, it's them. And sometimes, especially in science classes, the pace can be very high, and a lot of students can feel a lot of stress, and they don't necessarily have the opportunity to take a step back and feel that wonder, feel that connection. So in this class, it's my second year doing it now, I found it does help the learning. So the students are learning the physiology very effectively because it means something to them. they feel excited and thrilled to learn it. I shouldn't put words in their mouths, but they did say that in the surveys. And then also, they said that the practices help generate gratitude for themselves, which has been really key for them. And they have also learned how to take care of themselves. So, learning about the physiology of sleep can really impact a student. They realize it's not just a luxury to get sleep. It can actually affect their well-being. Learning about nutrition, learning about their bodies in all these different ways. So, and I just want to add for myself personally, it's been the greatest joy of my career. It's just been so joyful to teach this class. And I just feel like I could do it forever if the biology department lets me do it forever. So it's been joyful for them, it's been joyful for me. And I do feel like they are learning science in a very safe, exciting atmosphere. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all. This has been really rich discussion, and there's a great deal to unpack here. I wish we could go on for 8 to 10 more hours. We're going to shift to the question and answer in a moment, but as a transitional practice, I'd invite our guests to again bring us through a moment of mindfulness. Great, thank you so much. Recognizing that we are getting very close to the time that we said we would end, I would like to give people permission to leave if you need to leave. If you have other commitments, do not feel constrained. We will take, if it's okay, a couple of extra minutes. We started a little bit late to run through the question and answers, and then we're going to have some closing remarks by our colleague from German Studies. So I'll open the floor. We have a mic. There it is, okay. So as you raise your hand for a question, wait for the microphone to join you so that your question will be recorded and amplified.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you so much for this panel and for all of your insights. I'm an assistant professor in the religion department, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about how you navigate kind of introducing mindfulness practices related to religions and kind of their secularized benefits. How do you kind of introduce these in your classes, and how do you manage those discussions with students on secular mindfulness and acknowledging the religious traditions that these contemplative practices draw from?
So Sarah, thank you for that question. I think that there are many ways to do it. One, back to Brother, something you said about it's not a belief system, right? And trying to be very curious as much as possible. I'm an anthropologist, right? So I'm going to try to instill in my students a curiosity and a deep respect for cross-cultural experience, and to say that there is space for both curiosity, respectful engagement, lack of understanding, and a recognition that a cultural system or a belief system is different than a practice of mind. and to really sort of talk through how that works and why that works and give examples also that bring people perhaps into the reality of, let's say, a non-literate Buddhist woman in the Himalaya and how she might relate at some level to her connection to and experience with this thing called Buddhism or this thing called the mind, and then to sort of reel it back and say, what are some of the core elements that do translate across human experience that perhaps even help to unite us at some level through our shared humanity, but then where can we be curious and skeptical and asking good, deep questions about the differences and about the cultural context or the political context, back to Thich Nhat Hanh's seeds of ideas for this, and to sort of just show some of those distinctions. I think what's interesting, part of what works well or better when we're also practicing together is that by doing embodied stuff, you have to kind of shed some of your preconceptions about, what's going on here? Am I in church? No, I'm not in church, but I'm sort of in church because I'm in Rollins Chapel. And instead, you just have to kind of be in the space that you're in with yourself, and to be very focused on very simple things, the breath, the sounds of the room. This is where the work, the skill of someone like Sid comes in. It's also why I like to partner in these spaces as opposed to be the teacher myself. And I think that's also a skillful pivot to sort of say, I'm not the expert in this space. I'm the expert in this other space. I'm right along with you for the ride in this space, but I can absolutely talk with you about these questions that might be coming up. So that's one way to try to navigate that.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions?
Raise your hand high if you would like to ask a question.
Hello, my name is David. Yep. I noticed during the chant the other day at the chapel that the person in the middle was doing some hand gestures. I don't know what those are, and if you have time to explain, I would like to know. And also the chant, I'm from a Christian background, so is it like a prayer to everyone or to the universe or to the source, God or whatever you want to call it?
So just to give some context, we last night we offered a chant in Rollins Chapel, which is to the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Namo Avalokiteshvaraya in Sanskrit. And so this is the Bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition, or Mahayana Buddhist tradition, who is, in a sense, has arms to help all living beings and also listen to the cries of all living beings. So this kind of embodiment of compassion. And so that chant is, our teacher is very innovative. So he took an ancient Sanskrit homage, and then some of our monastic siblings put it to music, and then we saw that had a very deep effect on people, because for all the reasons, you can talk about the science behind it, but you relax the body. When you have a group of people who are generating compassion, and that's what we do during the chant, we send compassion first of all to ourselves, and then to all those who are in the room with us, and then we extend it out to everywhere in the cosmos. And when you do that, you feel better, first of all. And second, you also have more understanding. So when your body's relaxed, you're not in that fear, flight, what is it, fight or flight or freeze mode, right? But you're actually in an open space where understanding can come in. So those difficult relationships, and we all have them, in every moment that we're working with in our life, they can stop seeing like adversarial relationships and start becoming relationships of understanding. We start to see the suffering of that person. And actually, with our compassion, we can help transform that suffering. We start by transforming our relationship to that person so that the next time we see them, we might smile without fear rather than, the normal kind of putting up the armor and paranoia and this kind of thing. So it's a healing experience which happens in each listener, as well as supportive energy which goes out to all those in the room, and then that extends out. And so those gestures are just to symbolize that, to remind us of the practice. It's nothing esoteric, but it's more like, first of all, it's gesturing towards ourselves with the first line of the chant, and then the second is towards all those in the room, and then going out into the universe. And so it kind of gives you a focus in the chant. If you lose track, we all get distracted. So it's a way of just focusing on what is the practice that we're doing while we're doing that chant. And I just want to say that I hope this good energy will manifest in I'm sure it will, in many beautiful ways here on campus. And something that came to me yesterday or 2 days ago was, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a mindfulness house on campus? Like a place where you could live? I know for myself, that's what I was missing when I was an alum, a place where I could investigate my mind in a safe space with other students. Maybe we rotate cooking a meal, like we do in the monastery. I mean, we live like that in the monastery. We get up in the morning, we do sitting meditation, we do walking meditation. And I lived as a layperson in Cambridge Zen Center, which is in the Korean tradition, and you could practice meditation in the morning and then go out and work during the day and then come back and we would cook meals together. So I see there are many kind of affinity houses on campus, and it just feels like this is a kind of moment when there's a swell in this practice, and what we really need to do is embody it somehow. I feel classroom is good, but if there's a locus on campus, a place where this is happening, it's great, the wellness center on that corner by the stairwell and in Barrie, but I mean, to have an actual place where people are living and practicing mindfulness, I think it could have a powerful effect. Because it's one thing to bring these methods into the classroom, but it's another thing to live them in our daily life. And that's what we're doing as monastics. And there's a way to do it. I don't say it has to be a Buddhist house, but with mindfulness practice, where people who come there have certain commitments to how they're going to live in that space, a common intentionality. I don't know, it's a crazy idea. But
Great, well, thank you. I'd like to ask our colleague, Heidi Denzel, Associate Professor from German Studies, and a founder of a technique called Flow that she's been using with her colleagues in German Studies courses. So I'm going to move so I don't
I
block
want
you
to
out.
thank all the panelists for your great energy, for all your work and dedication to really do the commitment to care, practice the commitment to care, and for the Mindful Dartmouth initiative. So my name is Heidi Denzel. I'm a visiting associate professor at the German department. And 2 years ago, I reached out to Caitlin and LB because I could see and feel that our students were having a very hard time. In the summer of 2022, LB, Caitlin, Nick Ostra, and I started our FLOW initiative, and FLOW stands for Foreign Languages Offering Well-Being. So we met several times to think about ideas how we could integrate well-being into the German studies curriculum. A few months later, as you might remember, we had several suicides in our Dartmouth community. Our students were suffering, and my colleagues and I did not know what we could do to help our students. So once again, Caitlin, thank you so much for all your support and your patience and your expertise and your kindness. I really do not know what I would have done without you. I mean it. So with the help of Dika, I have developed an integrated daily mindfulness exercises into the German language curriculum. And what are these mindfulness exercises? I showed you last year an example how we mix yoga and grammar, so I call it yo-grammar. And when you say yoga is like relaxing into pain, I can tell you German grammar can be a pain. It's a horrible pain sometimes. So So our students love it. They want to have more meditations, more positive self-awareness exercises, more mood meters, and all the other great things that you're offering at the Student Wellness Center. And I want to read 2 of my favorite comments from our anonymous surveys from winter 2024. And this is a comment for German 1. At Dartmouth, we have a language requirement. Very often, our students don't want to take that class because they just have to learn a language, and then they take German. And German is an awful language, as Mark Twain says. But, so here, that's the context. So they have to take this class, they don't like it. And here comes the quotation, my favorite. The meditations were amazing. They positively impacted the rest of my day and made me feel like I was learning German for my own pleasure. Learning German for my own pleasure. That is amazing. And I think I should print that out and put it on my office door. But I think the next comment is even more interesting, and that is, everything was great. Please do this more, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Also, provide free training and compensation to the profs who want to learn how to do these types of trainings. This will make them better teachers and improve all our time. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And here I have good news for our students and also for you, my dear colleagues, because Dartmouth does offer free trainings. And I want to invite you to please scan the QR code on your way out and check out the resource guide that will pop up. So as you will see, Dartmouth has many opportunities and resources available to all of you. There are links to specific trainings. For example, next week, Flo and Decal, we will offer a session on mindfulness and well-being exercises for teachers of foreign languages. And also next week, there is the kickoff for the new training, Noontime, Intro to Mindfulness for Staff and Faculty. And there's still some spaces left, and I have some flyers here if you're interested. If you want to bring mindfulness and well-being practices into your classrooms or other learning environments, but do not have the time to take a training, please check out the Faculty Toolkit, and you can find the Faculty Toolkit on the website of the Mindful Dartmouth Initiative. This toolkit offers slide prompts, brief meditation videos, and audio files that you can easily integrate into your classes. So once again, thank you so much to all of you, and also to you that you showed up and you showed your commitment to care. Thank you so much. And I could not resist, I have to say that, may the great energy of our Dartmouth panelists and guests be with you as long as possible. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I guess we didn't quite plan for we're done, but we're done. Again, thank you all for coming. Thank you also for being comfortable with staying a little longer. Really appreciate the commitment to this event. And thanks again.